So now we have two matrices that aren't either a row or a column. So we have matrix A, 1, negative 2, 3, matrix, and then 4, 0, 5, and then matrix B, 2, negative 1, negative 3, 1, and 0, 4. And we're asked to find A times B. So I'm going to write these matrices right next to each other. It's nice to kind of line them up right next to each other when you do the multiplication. And let's first analyze the units, though. The dimensions, rather. What would the dimensions of A be? The order of A, same thing. 2 by 3. And what's the order of B? 3 by 2. Do the inner numbers match up? Yeah. So the multiplication is going to be possible, and here's how you do it. I think I'm going to give you a spoiler, just because it does make it easier. The outer numbers give you the order of the resulting product. So we can expect a 2 by 2 matrix as our product. Okay? Outer numbers are both 2. Okay, so what's the process? Well, you're going to take rows times columns. So to get the first row, rows times columns, I should say. To get the first row of entries, which is just going to have 2 entries in it because it's going to be a 2 by 2 matrix, you're going to take okay, so let me start with the upper left-hand entry. You're going to take the first row in the left-hand matrix A and multiply it times the first column in the right-hand matrix, which is matrix B. In other words, this is going to look, to get the upper left-hand entry in the product matrix, it's going to look like that example we just did above. We're going to take row times column in the same way we just did above. So let's write out what we would get if we take row times column. So, okay, let's take the 1 times the 2. So that's 2. I'm going to write it out for now, and then to show your work later on, you're just going to write down 2, not 1 times 2. But because it's the first example of 2 non-row or column matrices multiplied together, I want to show that. So 1 times 2, and then what's the next one? You're going to add in negative 2 times negative 3. Would you buy that? As long as it's cheap? Okay. And then what's the next one? 3 times 0. And again, normally you would just say 0 like you just did. But since it's the first example, I'm showing it. I might not show it for the rest of the entries, but I wanted to show it for at least one of them. That's the upper left-hand entry. We know it's a 2 by 2 matrix, right? So there's one more upper right-hand entry. So how do you get it? Well, I'll show you. You go on, you keep the first row in A circled. You're going to multiply that row times the next column over in B. Whoops, I erased too much. So you're going to circle the next column over in the second matrix, but you're going to keep this row circled and multiply first row in the first matrix times second column in the second matrix to get the next entry in the first row of the product. Whew, that's a mouthful. So what do you get when you take row times column? What's 1 times negative 1? Negative 1. Negative 2 times this one right here, what's that? So plus a negative 2 or just minus 2? And then what's the next one going to be? Plus 12. Does everybody see where these numbers are coming from? Once you get it, it's not hard. Until you get it, it seems weird. It seems confusing until you really grasp it. Now, I didn't show all the individual multiplications. I just did them. Does that make sense? Okay, that's the upper right-hand entry. We'll simplify that in the next part of the problem. Now, to get the lower left-hand entry, you're going to start over, but with the second row in the first matrix circled. So you're going to circle the 4, 0, 5, and then you're going to get the second row in the product by doing the same process, only you're going to multiply the second row in A times, eventually both columns in B. So to get the lower left-hand element or entry, you're going to multiply the second row in A times the first column in B. So what do you get individually? What do you get? 4 times 2, 8. Everybody see where that's coming from? 4, this 4 right here times this 2. What's the next one? Plus 0 times negative 3 is 0. Plus 5 times 0 is 0. Now, I do want to see that work. When I ask you to show your work, this is what I mean. You don't need to show as much work as I showed in the first entry, highlighted kind of in purple there, but you do need to show the work in the second entry in the first row and that sort of work with the plus 8 plus 0 0 8 plus 0 plus 0 rather in the lower left hand entry. I do want to see that to make sure you know how to do this by hand, because calculators will do this obviously, but it's still super important you understand what the calculator is doing so that you know how to manipulate data, especially if you're going to get into any kind of research. Okay, so now the lower right hand entry is going to be obtained by, okay, you stick with the second row in A, but now you shift over to the second column in B. And what entries do you get there? 4 times negative 1, negative 4, what's the next one? 0 times 1, and then 5 times 4, so add that in, 20. Let's clean this up, and then we'll have our answer. What do we end up getting for the upper left-hand entry? So, yeah, it's 2 plus 6 because we have 0 on the third term. So 8, and then what do we get over here? 9, and then 8 and 16. There you go. There's your product.